All right, everyone. Welcome to the PSI Real Estate Exam Prep. My name is Charles Coleman. I am the team leader of Keller Williams Avenues Realty. And with that, I'm also a night school instructor and very excited to help you guys kind of go through this. And so what this looks like today is we're going to put some focus on Colorado. I know that depending on who you are, you might feel that, Colorado is your opportunity or the National is your opportunity. And I would say this, it's mostly just a mindset. And so today what we're going to do is we will talk about, some best practices. And then we're also going to dive into some of the questions that I think you're going to see on the exam, as well as some explanations of why it is what it is. And so through this thing, I tried not to make this more of a lecture, and I try to make it more participatory, and we'll kind of see what it looks like as we go forward. So on the exam, for you guys are all going to become associate brokers. And this is straight from PSI. And on the bottom left-hand corner, what you can see is a barcode. And if you wanted to scan that, that's going to take you to the PSI candidate bulletin for Colorado. It's going to show you basically like what you're going to be looking at when you go to take your exam. And so since we are all associate brokers, we hold the highest licensure in the United States. And what it basically means is that all of you guys are taking an exam that states that you could be a managing broker in all reality, except for in the state of Colorado, we have to have 2 years of supervision. And so we need to know just as much as a managing broker needs to know, and we still get to get supervised for 2 years at minimum. So with our exam, it breaks down to national, which is 80 questions, and you have to get 60 of them correct. And you get 120 minutes allowed time to knock this thing out. And then you move on to the state. And it's 74 questions. You have to get 53 of them correct, and you have 110 minutes. So with this thing, you're going to go sit in this room in PSI testing facility, depending on where you are in Colorado. And you are going to sit down, you're going to attack national first, and then you're going to do state. And I've heard people ask me in the past, like, Charles, I just want to go do one or the other. And this is the thing. I think a lot of the content crosses over between the two. And so I would say go in prepped to do both and take both because it's going to cost you the same. It's not like one of them is $25 and the other is $25. They're going to cost you north of $50 to do both of them regardless. So I would just knock them both out. And if you feel more comfortable studying for one than the other, then do it that way. So let's start off with this. Let's talk about some tips. Firstly, guys, let's be rested. And that also means do not go into this thing cramming the night before, right? You need your sleep. And unless you are someone that, stays out all night and you're a high functioning person, don't do this the night before the exam. And I would say the cramming piece, like if you didn't retain it for the X amount of hours that you've been studying anyways, an extra couple hours that are going to hurt your sleep are going to be worse off for you. The second thing is, guys, plan to use all of your 230 minutes, right? Like you have that time allotted. And at the top right corner, there's going to be a ticking counter that's going to go down. It's going to let you know how much time is left. Use the time. It's there for you. Utilize it. Read each question twice. And this is the thing, guys. I think this is very, very, very important. And depending on the different tips that you get, depending on who you're listening to or talking to, they're going to say maybe read the questions first and then read the answers first and then read the question, or read the question twice and then look at the answers, or read the question, look at the answers, and then go reread the question. Whatever you feel comfortable with. But this is the thing: get two sets of eyes on this thing, because firstly, they're going to be deceiving. This is a for-profit company. They want to take as much money from you as they possibly can. The second thing is your mind and eyes work at different speeds. And so as you're scrolling through and you're doing different things and your mind's comprehending, and then you land on something, well, it's probably going to be the wrong answer because that's how the test is designed to do it, right? So it's going to give you a little bit of piece of information. Your eyes are going to scan. It's going to find the answer that goes with it. But unfortunately, the real question was a little bit deeper into that paragraph. Look for the negatives. They're going to say everything but, except for, not, especially on the state. Like the state they're going to do this to you, there's going to be even more double negatives. So as we're going through this, guys, you have to be able to call these things out, which are going to protect you. Answer every question, right? If you leave it blank, it's still wrong. So at least put something down on paper. Guess, best guess, put it forward. If it's not there in the question, don't add it. So a lot of you guys, as you've been studying, you're going to be connecting a lot of dots that might not be there. So if it's only talking about the seller's agent, don't add the buyer's agent into the equation, right? This is specific. You have to know exactly what situation you're in and don't add to the story. Look at what they're asking you and just answer towards that. Choose the best answer possible. Obviously, right? There's two right answers. This is a standardized test. Two answers are completely garbage, especially if it's something that you're looking at and you're like, I've never heard of that. That's not the answer. Like, trust yourself. You have done so much studying at this point that if you look at something, you're like, I've never heard of that, it's because it's not real. So ignore that answer. And there's going to be two garbage answers, throw them away. There's going to be a right answer and a more right answer. And what I mean by that is, like, yes, this answer does make sense and it probably does fit in this situation. But because of this answer is here, this is the more right answer. We'll look at some of those today. Use the process of elimination again, like just start scratching some things off. And obviously, study. Like, go into this thing. You guys are here today, which tells me that you actually care. This, at the time of this recording, it's 11 a.m. in Colorado, and you guys are here on a Saturday studying because you know that this is a life-changing career. You guys take this serious. So I'm excited for you, and that's why I'm more than willing to dedicate some of my time for you guys as well, because I know that the people on this call are truly serious about advancing into a different life. So as we look at this, guys, here's something to keep in mind. Here's the difference between agency, transaction broker, and customer. Ryan, we got thumbs up and we got thumbs down all the way across the board. And we know that within an agency relationship, when we have a client or a principal, we're the agent and we owe them the most, right? We owe them obedience, loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, accountability of their money, reasonable care, and honesty. Like, that is something that we owe every client of ours. Then we have a transaction broker, and transaction broker doesn't owe obedience. They don't owe loyalty. They do owe disclosure, confidentiality, accountability of their money, reasonable care, and honesty again. And then when we get to a customer, we don't owe obedience. We don't owe loyalty. We do owe disclosure, right? And these are disclosure of material facts. So if the roof leaks, we know that we must disclose it. Even if our client says, don't disclose that the roof leaks, we know that we have to. We do not owe confidentiality. If we find something, we actually must tell our client. Like, if we find out something that our client can use to get them the most amount of money or to put them in a better position to win the deal, we must tell our client. So if we find out this stuff about a customer, we actually are obligated to tell our client. Accountability of their money, again, like if you get an earnest money check or something, like, you have to know where that earnest money goes. We do not owe them reasonable care. And we owe them honesty. Like, and so everyone, guys, we can't lie to them. We have to know where their money is if we touch it. And we must disclose material facts if we know it. You see this pin at the top left of this agency piece. And what I want you to know is that in the state of Colorado, to be an agent for someone, the agreement must be in writing. It must be in writing for you to actually have an agency relationship with someone, which means that if we don't have an agreement in writing, our default is transaction broker in the state of Colorado. So if we do not have the agreement inked in paper, it is a transaction brokerage relationship, which truly means, like, we can't do our job to the fullest. And we'll talk about that. So an agency, that's where we're in writing and we owe everything to our client. So let's look at some things. These guys, what I have going for it is about 32 more questions around some of the things that I think you're going to see on the exam. So as we're going through this, feel free to screenshot it, but I think some of these are important. There will be a recording, and so you'll be able to watch this a little bit later or listen to it or whatever makes most sense for you. and we're going to break down what the answers look like. So I'm going to give all of these like a brief pause so that you can look through the answers. And I would participate at home, whether that's on your phone and just put the answer down on your phone to see if you got it right. If you have a pen and paper, feel free to write it out. But let's practice here like we plan on participating at the PSI exam, right? Because if we're just sitting, we're listening, and we're not really going through the motions, that's probably how we're going to show up at the exam. So a seller receives a flyer and a phone call from a broker at XYZ Realty suggesting that the seller should list with the firm and that broker. The seller's home is actively listed with another company, ABC Realty. Is there an issue with XYZ Realty? So we go through and says, no, this is a standard practice and is acceptable. No, as long as the seller's phone number is not on the do not call list. It says, yes, the broker may send flyers with a disclaimer, but may not make phone calls. Or yes, they may not advise to an active listing until at least 10 days after the listing expires. So the answer is C, right? And this is why. The answer is yes. The broker may send flyers as a disclaimer, but may not make phone calls. By tradition, brokerage firms may advertise or farm an area if a disclaimer is added to the flyer or mailing. And it states that the broker will not negotiate for a listing when they know the consumer has an unexpired contract with another brokerage. So brokers should verify in the MLS if a property is currently listed before calling. So we can send out paper collateral to a farm. We just have to let them know that this is not a solicitation if they are currently under representation. And we know sign crossing, right? We cannot pick up the phone and call someone that has an agency relationship with someone. That's sign crossing, and that is against the law. And that's pretty quickly how you would lose your license. All right. In Colorado, real estate commissions are negotiated. All right, now, are they negotiated by the local group of brokers? Are they between the parties? Are they between the employing brokers? Or are they set first by the commission and then between the parties? So we look at this thing and it's between the parties. And it's between the parties, and they're always negotiated between the broker and the other party to the agreement. So if we're getting an agency agreement with someone, as we sit down, we're going to have a conversation. So we're sitting down at the dining room table or at Starbucks or wherever you are negotiating this agency agreement. If you go through and do any of the other stuff, that is an antitrust law, especially this. And I actually think that you're going to get an exam question that reads something along the lines of, if you enter into a room where other agents are talking about commissions, what should you do? And the answer is get up and walk out immediately. Guys, this is such a big deal. And so these are always negotiable. And this is the thing, if they're coming at a point to where they're like, hey, I want you to do it for this amount of money, and you don't want to use your time for that amount of money, you don't have to take the deal, right? These are always negotiable. We can't say, no, this is by law, or this is how we always do things. It's always negotiable. Under Colorado real estate law, which of the following is not true? A real estate agent is a single agent. All agency agreements must be in writing. An agent who is representing the sale of his own property can act as a transaction broker to the buyer. The type of brokerage relationship the firm offers is by law required to be in writing. And so as we're looking at this, guys, this is one of the things that goes to which is not true, right? So this is one of those ones where if you were to go through and you're like Colorado real estate law, which one is true, right? Or you just skip through it real quick and you say real estate agent is a single agent. All agency agreements must be in writing. The type of brokerage relationship the firm offers is by law required to be in writing. Like, you could trip over one of those if you don't read and then reread the question. So the answer is C. And it's C because the agent who is representing the sale of their own property can act as a transaction broker. A broker may not be an agent, to one party and a transaction broker to another in the same transaction. The broker would have to treat the buyer as a customer in this case because the broker is an agent representing their own interest. So, like, we can go through here. This is not true. Again, so this is not true. An agent who is representing the sale of their own property can act as a transaction broker. So as we're going through, that means that there is different agency relationships that we would have to look through and follow. A loan being assumed by the buyer has what effect at closing? Debit seller, credit buyer, credit seller, debit buyer, credit seller, credit broker, credit seller, debit broker. So as we're going through, we're talking about an assumed loan. This is someone that already has a mortgage on the property and that they are going through and they are selling their house and someone else is taking over their mortgage, taking over their loan responsibilities. So the answer would be debit the seller and credit the buyer, and this is why. The assumed loan represents funds the buyer does not bring to the table and funds the seller will not receive. Remember that all loans are always a buyer credit. Debit the seller the amount and credit it to the buyer. That's what this looks like. And this is always, and this is pretty much for any and every loan that you guys are going to go through. A brokerage firm acquired a contract software program to use in the firm. After a month of use, a broker associate discovers that one of the approved forms is missing a section. Who is responsible for this error? So is it A, the brokerage firm, B, the employing broker, all brokers, and the software company, C, each broker using the software, or D, the software company? And so, guys, this is the thing. It's each broker using the software. We are always responsible, right? Anything that we do, we are responsible for it. Now, that doesn't mean that the managing broker isn't also responsible. And it also doesn't mean that the software company isn't going to have some opportunity later down the road because people are probably going to stop using their software. So as we're going through here, C is the best answer. I agree. The brokerage firm is a good answer. I almost agree that B is a good answer as well, except for the software company that isn't a licensed real estate agent. So the board, the commission isn't going to do anything to them. I mean, people might boycott and stop using their software if it's getting them fined and everything. So I can see like A and C being a correct answer, but C is more correct. It's going to start with us because we are responsible for everything that we do. Then it kind of rolls up to the brokerage firm as well. The approved licensee buyout addendum provides for all of the following except what? And it says A, the buyer may be exposed to expenses or losses. All losses or profits after closing will be the responsibility of the buyer. C, the seller will pay commissions and cover any losses after closing. The buyer is a licensed broker and can qualify to make the purchase. So again, this is talking about the licensee buyout addendum, and this is what's also known as an inducement, right? This is an inducement to the contract. This is a, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I know that you have to be in this state by this time, and I know that you're interviewing 3 real estate agents. And this is the thing. If you use me, and if I can't get it sold in that allotted time that you need to be in your new state, I will buy the house. And so this is an inducement. This is an incentive for the seller to use you as a real estate agent. So this is saying, this is all the rules except for one of these is, and this is the thing, the seller will pay commissions and cover any losses after closing. No, like after the seller has sold the house to the real estate agent, the real estate agent is responsible for anything and everything after that. So it says, the approved licensee buyout addendum states that the seller will not pay a commission or be responsible for losses after a closing, right? This is saying like, hey, agent, you raised your hand. You're the professional. I gave you a deal on this property. And if anything else happens later down the road, it's on you. Brokers selling real estate must renew their license and errors and omission. This could also be written E&O, insurance every what? And so it says 3 years for the license and every 3 years for errors and omissions insurance. Year for the license and every 3 years for errors and omissions insurance. Every 3 years for the license and every year for errors and omissions insurance. Or 3 years for the license and every 2 years for errors and omissions insurance. This is the thing. First and foremost, guys, I need you all to understand that you renew your license every 3 years. But first and foremost, I think you're going to get some type of test question around that, and you need to know that. The answer is C. So we went through and we were able to eliminate everything that said license is 1 year, right? Let's get rid of those. And now the other thing is your E&O is a yearly thing, just like any other insurance. And so this insurance is no different than your car insurance. It's no different than your health insurance. This is a yearly thing. And so we're going through errors and omissions insurance. E&O renews annually, and their real estate license is every 3 years. All right. A seller received a flyer. Nope. We already did this one. A broker lists the square footage of a new listing in the marketing materials. The listing broker must do all of the following except what? Give the form to the buyer in a timely manner. Lists the method used to measure the property. Personally measure or hire someone to measure the property. Verify that the buyer received a copy of the disclosure. So the answer to this is C, everyone. And so as we're going through, we have to do the give it to the buyer in a timely manner, right? We actually have contingency deadlines that actually say when they actually have to have this information. So that's the timely manner. Time is of the essence. And if it says that it is due on Friday, then it's due on Friday. List the method used. Yes, this is a marketing piece, right? And we have to say, like, who measured it? Where did we get this information from? We actually have to verify that the buyer received a copy of this disclosure, right? And they do that by signing it. So we're going to get a copy of a signed disclosure from the buyer. We don't personally measure it. Like I said, this is for advertising purposes. We are not appraisers. We are not contractors. We are real estate agents. And so we are not going through and measuring the property. We're not hiring someone. Like, this is on our client. So it is C. And it says they must disclose how it was measured or where the square footage information comes from. And this could be the tax assessor office. This could have been from when they bought the house and they got the prints of the property. Like, this could be anything. We just have to make sure that we're letting it know. No, so the question was, does the listing broker usually always measure the property? And so never. The listing agent's never measuring the property. That's up to your client. So that's up to the seller. They have to give it to you so that you could upload it, but you're going to give them a form. It's a square footage disclosure is the form, and they have to write the square footage, where it came from, the date of where this information came from, and then they sign it. And again, this is for marketing purposes only. And there's also a disclosure at the very bottom, or disclaimer even, and it reads like, if this is important to you as a buyer, then we recommend you to go have your own independent person go and measure this property. So no, so we're never doing this. A broker and a seller agree orally to extend the terms of an exclusive listing agreement. The seller is bound by the extended dates. So only if the broker gets a completely new listing agreement with the new date, as long as the broker gets a written agreement to amend before the revised expiration date, because the statute of frauds permits oral modification to the written contract, if the writing agreement to amend extend is signed before the original expiration date. So as we're going through this thing, guys, I think the first one, like C, is completely garbage. And so hopefully all of you threw C away and you were like, no, Charles, the statute of frauds must be in writing, right? That's what the statute of frauds, for anything to be enforceable, it must be in writing. And this is what this thing is talking about. So if we are orally agreeing to something, it must be in writing to be enforceable. So if the written agreement to amend extend is signed before the original expiration date of the contract, then we can extend the contract out X amount of time, whatever that time looks like to us that we need. So the answer is D to this thing. It says oral extension must be followed up with a written document before the original document's expiration date. You cannot extend something that no longer exists, and the listing agreement does not exist after its expiration date has passed, right? We know that everything, we have to have a definite start date and a definite end date. And so to extend this definite end date, we have to have an amend, and it has to happen somewhere on this side of the expiration date of the contract. A buyer is sent notice to terminate to the listing broker based on the buyer's inspection of the property. So the buyer was not happy with something. The notice was sent at 11 p.m. on the date listed under the inspection objection deadline. And so this is a contingency, guys. And so I actually think that they're going to word this more as contingencies on the exam. And so this is before the inspection objection contingency deadline, which is really just a deadline that says like on or before. So immediately return the earnest money to the buyer. Tell the seller that they have until the inspection resolution deadline to request that the buyer give them a list of repairs so the contract can close. Request that all parties, including the buyer's broker, sign an earnest money release form, or split the money between the sellers because the buyer is in default. The answer is immediately return. This is the thing. Firstly, if the buyer wants out and they are on or before their contingency date and deadline, they can get out, right? Every home in Colorado is sold as is, where is. And so I think that you could actually get a question that's in the reverse order that says like, the buyer has demanded that the seller fix all of these issues. What does the seller have to do? And the answer is nothing. They can if they want to. And just think about the market, right? The market has shifted a little bit, right? As at the time of this recording, at least, to where we're seeing some houses sit on the market a little bit longer. And so maybe if a buyer comes with like a whole sheet of written demands, like you're going to be more apt to do them so that you can get this thing closed. But every home in Colorado is sold as is, where is. And we as a seller do not have to fix anything. So it says, unless there is a dispute, earnest money is to be returned immediately. This presumes that all conditions of the contract were followed, right? So, and what this means is that unless there's a dispute, and you can't dispute it just because you're like, I don't want to give them their money back. It's like, no, they missed a date, or they said that this was the issue, and I know that that wasn't the issue because they brought this thing up, and that's what they said. So that is the, unless there's a dispute, earnest money must be returned. So if they said inspection, there's an issue, I don't like the way this house looks because of this inspection, and it's on the date and deadline, the contingency date and deadline, give them their money back. According to the approved contract to buy and sell, a buyer who is dissatisfied with the inspection results must have the seller complete all repairs by the resolution deadline, should notify the seller within 24 hours of receiving the inspection report, may terminate the contract with written notice immediately, must offer the seller an opportunity to resolve the problems. So guys, this looks a lot like the last one that we just did. To the buyer's sole discretion, as long as they are on or before their date and deadline, they can get out of the question. What was the question again? The question was, according to the approved contract to buy and sell, so that's the contract between the buyer and the seller, a buyer who is dissatisfied with their inspection results may what? And it says the inspection contingency states that the buyer is their subjective opinion. And guys, this is what this means. Like if I go into a house and I'm doing the inspection and I'm on this thing, right? And because most of us do live with this thing attached to us, and I'm trying to, get on the internet or whatever, and I realize that there's no uh strong broadband signal, like maybe I don't have any bars, I can terminate the contract. I can say, you know what, based off of the home inspection, and I know that my phone, like I'm going to be on this thing all the time, like I don't have any bars at your home. I'm canceling the contract. It is at the buyer's subjective opinion, their sole discretion. The buyer is not even required to have the property inspected. That's what this thing looks like. Which of the following could a Colorado real estate broker use toward meeting the 12 hours of required elective continuing education? So we know, right, that we have to have 24 hours within a 3-year period. All right. 12 of those hours are ACU, the annual commission update. All right. So let's take those off the board. Now we have our other 12 that we have to hit within 3 years. So passing the national portion of the broker licensing exam, an exam prep class taken to prepare for the state portion of the licensing exam, the National Association of Realtors ethics course, or a brokerage firm's orientation and personal marketing course. So we go through here, guys, and this is the thing. Firstly, you can take the Colorado portion again. You can't take the national one, doesn't matter. So you could take the Colorado portion again. So that's in Colorado. That would be a correct answer. An exam prep course. Exam prep doesn't count ever. So no exam prep counts towards CE credits, and orientation and personal marketing courses don't count towards CE classes either. And the National Association of Realtors ethics course is considered an elective that meets part of the requiring education CE. Exam prep, orientation, and passing the national portion of the state exam will not count. Passing the state portion of the exam will give you 24 hours. So if you go through and you're just like, Charles, dude, I love taking this test, this is very exciting, then no need to ever do any CE credits, guys. Like you could just take this exam every 3 years and you would be good. It would cost you $54. Go in on a Saturday morning, knock this thing out, and you'd be good every 3 years. Don't do that. That's no fun. Colorado approved contracts contains a clause that states the parties agree to mediate if they have a dispute. All of the following are true of the clause except what? So A, the parties will jointly agree on a mediator and then split the cost equally. B, if the parties mediate, they may not proceed to an arbitrator or litigation. C, it is not a negotiable choice. D, a signed resolution will be binding on all parties. So this is the thing, guys. If we go to mediation and we mediate, we don't go to arbitration later. Like, why would we? Right? Like, we came to an agreement at mediation. We're not going to go to the court system. So it says mediation is the first step in a conflict resolution process. If we were to fail to mediate, then we're going to go to arbitration or litigation, right? Like, let the lawsuits fly and let's have our day in court. But if we mediate, because this is saying this, we mediate at mediation. So it doesn't say like we go to mediation and didn't agree. No, mediate means that we went to mediation and we agreed on it. So we're not going to court next. We already resolved our issues. A buyer's agent is asked by the buyers if the agent can represent them as a seller's agent when they decide to sell. The broker's company offers only buyer agency. They should what? And it says refer the buyers to a friend who does all types of representation. Give the buyers the definition of working relationship disclosure form, and then ask them to sign it, and then refer them to buyers to another agent. List the property as a pocket listing without the knowledge of an employing broker. Give the buyer the broker disclosure to buyer form and have them become customers. So this is the thing, guys. You have to, if we do not offer that form of relationship, we actually have to let them know what we do. So it says this. It says the rule for when the broker must give the definition of working relationship form is if a member of the public asks the broker for a form of representation that the firm does not offer. So someone comes to me and my firm only does buyer's agency, and someone says, "Hey, will you be my seller's agent?" You can't do that. So yes, A is right. You're like, cool, like I'm just going to send this out and get some mailbox money, because that's the best thing about being a real estate agent is I had to do little work, and someone sent me a portion of their paycheck to my mailbox. Rock and roll. But first, we have to have them sign the definition of working relationship. So that then we have to go and we can refer them at that point. Like you don't have to, but I would because it's money. So that's why A is right, but B is more right. And that's what I'm saying. Like there is two good answers in all these tests. Having them work as a customer, like we can't do that. There's no payment there. And listing the property as a pocket listing, that's against the law. Like you know that everything that you do must go through your brokerage. So this is a great way to lose your license, number C, or letter C even. A broker has signed an exclusive right to buy listing contract. The broker may get their commission from the listing broker, who must pay the negotiated fee at closing, the buyer, who must pay the fee at closing, the buyer, the seller, or the listing broker. Only from the listing broker or seller, the buyer is under no obligation to pay. So the answer is C. And guys, this is very important, right? And so the exclusive right to buy listing contract states that the broker will seek payment from the listing broker or the seller and may get paid by the buyer. The buyer will be obligated to pay only if the correct box in the contract is checked. And the broker cannot get paid from the seller or the listing broker. So, guys, there's a lot of different pieces in here. And so when we're talking about the buyer, the seller, or the listing broker, that's also important. I think you might get a test question that reads something like this, and this is the reason why. Your agency is not determined upon who pays you. All right. So it does not matter who pays you. That is what the commission structure looks like. So if the listing agent is paying me as the buyer's agent, that doesn't mean that I work for the seller, and vice versa. And so the buyer can pay you, the seller can pay you, the listing broker can pay you. It's actually dictated inside of your exclusive right. There's 3 check boxes that says where you will get your payment from. That's what this is. If the taxes for the preceding year are unpaid at the time of closing, the amount will always be all right. So if taxes for the preceding year are unpaid at the time of closing, the amount will always be what? Paid outside of closing, a credit on the buyer's closing statement, prorated between the buyer and the sellers, a debit on the seller's closing statement. So the answer is a debit on the seller's closing statement. Unpaid taxes represent a lien on the property and must be paid in full, right? We can't have cloud on title. They are the obligation of the seller because they are they're from the previous year, debt the seller for the bill they owe, and we're going to go through, and the question only requires the answer for the closing statement. So it is a debit to the seller. That's what this thing is looking like. Which of the following is true of a broker who attaches an addendum they drafted but was not negotiated by the parties to a purchase contract. A, the broker is in violation of Chapter 7. This is not an issue if the broker's attorney reviewed the addendum. The contract would be voidable. The buyer should have used a commission-approved form. So the answer is the broker would have violated Chapter 7. And this is the thing, everyone. Like, I'm not concerned about you knowing what the rule is, like that this is a Chapter 7 violation. Just know that this is the thing. Everything that you put in a contract must be negotiated. There's no standard amendments to a contract. So if you're going in and you're printing out the form and you're putting stuff into those fill in the blanks, and you're just like, here you go, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, here you go, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, please sign here. That's against the law. So that is a violation of Chapter 7. It says brokers are not allowed to draft addendums to the contract to buy and sell that are not included terms negotiated between the buyer and the seller. Addendums that are included terms for negotiated by the parties must be prepared by an attorney or a principal to the contract. So if we're going through and we're changing anything in the contract, someone actually has to tell us what that thing looks like. We can't just go through and pre-print stuff and put it out there for the public.
Charles, your screen is not recording again.
Perfect.
So
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. A listing broker must disclose her brokerage relationship with the seller to any unrepresented buyer before showing the house, providing any information about the listing, discussing potentially confidential information, discussing anything else. The answer is discussing any potentially confidential information, right? Like, as we're going through here, guys, this is what's important. We looked at the very beginning, like what we owe our client versus what we owe a customer. And if someone's telling me anything that I know that will help my client, I must disclose that. And so we actually have to let the buyer know that anything that you say to me will be used against you because I am going to tell my client. So it says Rule 6.5.A states that the broker must disclose the brokerage relationship they have with the seller before discussing or accepting any potential confidential information. So this is the relationship I have with the seller. If you tell me anything, I must let my client know. That's what this is breaking down. So again, I don't need you to understand the rules. I just need you to understand what you are being truly asked. And it's like, I owe my client disclosure on anything that I know. Which of the following is not true about a designated broker? So it says designation must be in writing. The employing broker designates the broker to provide services. Designation may be from a policy statement. The designated broker owns the listing. So the answer is the designated broker owns the listing, guys. And we've talked about this, right? Like, as we're going through, it doesn't matter where the relationship comes from. This could be your best friend from high school. This could be someone that you have a relationship from anywhere else. This could be your significant other. This could be someone that you met on an online lead generation. The brokerage owns the listing, not the designated broker. So the employing broker does not designate the broker, always owns, or the employing broker, not the designated broker, always owns the listing contract and designates a broker to represent the member of the public. And again, it doesn't matter where that relationship has come from. The designation can be in the form of either a policy statement or a written designation. The designation must be in writing, right? And that's why we have those contracts and forms. The employing broker does not have the brokerage relationship with the buyer or the seller. And so, guys, and that's also important because of this. Like, you could get a test question that reads like, your supervising broker, your managing broker represents the other party. Is that legal? Right? It's gonna be something like that. And obviously we know it's not true or false. It's four answers, but the answer is true. Like, it is legal. And so your employing broker can supervise you and can represent the other party to the contract. And because they've had training in doing this and that there is no conflict of interest. A broker associate works for Keller Williams Avenues Realty. That's a great brokerage to work for. The broker must ensure that all advertising, including social media, has the firm's trade name as registered with the Department of Revenue, the brokerage's name as registered with the Real Estate Commission, the firm's trade name and at least 2 times larger than the brokerage name. The broker's name and the firm's trade name must be the same size. So if you guess the Colorado Real Estate Commission, you're absolutely right. Like the brokerage name that is registered with CREC, the Colorado Real Estate Commission, is what has to go there. There is no requirement on the size of the trade name. The law states that the brokerage firm's name as registered with the commission must be on all of your advertising, because we cannot mislead the public, guys. We cannot let them think that we are out on our own and we are our own entity. They have to know who we work for. And just think about this, like, they have to know where to send the fine. Like, if you go out and you do something silly, they need to know where is the address to mail your fine to you. A buyer is in a closed transaction, a buyer in a closed transaction has filed a complaint with the Colorado Real Estate Commission, claiming the buyer's agent misrepresented the property. The commission, in responding to a complaint, would request the agent broker to supply a response in writing, use its subpoenaed power to request records from the agent's brokerage, start a lawsuit on behalf of the buyer, seize all the brokerage firm's records. Guys, this is the thing. If something happens, and I know I told you guys stories about this, if something happens in a complaint and someone files a complaint and it's in writing, the Colorado Real Estate Commission must act. Like, they have to look at this thing. So what they're going to do is they're going to send you a document asking you, like, did you do this? Please explain. You have X amount of time to get this back to us. Like, that's what this thing's going to look like. And you can't just pick up the phone and be like, hey, I got your notice and we're all good. No, you actually have to put it back in writing and fire it over. The commission will first request a response in writing. The commission does not use lawsuits and subpoenas and cannot take records until a response is activated or received. And so if we're going through this, this means that anything that happens, you have to respond, and they're not gonna send you a lawsuit. So you're gonna get probably a test question around that as well, guys. The commission does not take you to court. They don't sue you. They don't get a subpoena. They can't do anything like that. They can fine you. They can absolutely fine you. They can remove your license. They can revoke your license. They can suspend your license. They can do all these different things to your license, but they can't sue you. So you might get a test question around that as well. In Colorado, a number of approved forms are used by brokers. A listing broker asks a seller to complete the approved seller's property disclosure for a residential property. All of the following are true about this form, except for what? It is filled out to the best of the seller's current actual knowledge. Brokers should never fill out this form because it is the seller's disclosure. The seller may refuse to provide the disclosure form, but must still give a written list of all known material defects about the property. It is required by law to be given to the buyer as part of the contract to buy and sell. So the answer is, it isn't required by law. All these other things are true, guys. Like, your seller does not need to give this information over, like this disclosure, but any information pertaining to the property, they still have to disclose. So they're like, I'm not signing that. If they know that the roof leaks, they still got to tell that the roof leaks. You're never going to fill this out. This is a seller's disclosure, and your seller has to do it to their current actual knowledge. So what that means is, like, if they think that there is a crack in the wall behind the drywall, but they don't know, then they don't know. They're not disclosing that. They're disclosing their current actual knowledge, which means this. If they submit a seller's property disclosure day one, 15 days into the transaction, the roof starts leaking, they actually have to fill out another one to their current actual knowledge that this is a new issue. So keep that in mind. It says the law does not require the seller to complete this approved property disclosure. However, the seller will still need to disclose in writing all material facts about the property. Saying that, hey, this was a rental property, I've never lived here, does not constitute not having the knowledge, because they know. Upon filing the election and demand with the public trustee, the next step in a foreclosure is the lender must advise and send notice to the mortgagor. The borrower must move out of the property within 60 days. The public trustee will advertise the foreclosure sale. The borrower will need to pay off the entire loan to stop foreclosure. All right, right now I'm feeling good that you guys are probably 50-50 on this question. Half of you said C, the other half said D. And this is the thing, the answer is C. And it says the public trustee will be responsible for advertising the sale of the property. Once the lender files the NED, the notice of election and demand, the lender is no longer responsible for any notice to the borrower. Under Colorado law, during the right to cure period, the borrower only needs to bring the loan current to stop the foreclosure act. So this is the thing. They could, they could, but it doesn't say that they will need to pay off the entire loan to stop the foreclosure. Like, yeah, okay. But this is the thing. The public trustee will advertise that the foreclosure sale. C is more correct. Like, I feel like D is going to be an answer that you're going to want to touch. But just go through this. They're actually talking about the next step in the foreclosure process. And the next step is actually to advertise it. That's what this is. So don't add steps into here and jump to D. This is just the next step in the process. A broker developed a website to advertise the broker's office with the brokerage's name, the location, and the phone number. What additional information does the broker need to include? The name of all active licenses, addresses, and phone numbers, license number of the brokerage and list of the current active licensees, the name and address of the home office and the state in which the brokerage holds license, or no need for any additional disclosure. The answer is D. There's no need for any more disclosure. So the law states that the brokerage firm's name, as registered with the commission, must be on all advertising. Because website met that requirement, there's no need for anything else. So in all reality, guys, the brokerage's name is the only thing that needed to be on there. Not the location, not the phone number. The brokerage's name was the minimum amount of info. All of the following are true about the Colorado Fair Housing Law, except for what? The state law adds marital status and sexual orientation to the federal protected classes. Owners of multiple units are expected to make reasonable accommodations for disabled tenants, such as reserved parking without charging the tenant. Both residential and commercial property are covered, while the federal laws only applies to residential property. Disabled tenants must make a request to the owner or the management company in order to make reversible changes to the unit. This is the thing, guys. They don't need to ask your permission to go make reasonable changes to the property. If they want to go hang the bath bar, right? If they want to go hang the bath bar in the bathroom, you cannot tell them no. They don't need to ask you to do it. It says, tenant must make a request to the owner or management company in order to make reversible changes to their unit. That's not true. Like any tenant, disabled tenants make reversible changes without permission. Like there's no difference, right? Like if I wanted to go hang a TV in my house and I'm a renter, I don't need to get permission to hang the TV. I probably need to take the TV down and to cover up the holes before I leave and get some paint on there. Same thing for a tenant. They do not need to get permission to make reasonable, reversible changes. In a single party listing, which of the following provisions or contingencies do not apply? Commission, holdover, mediation, financing. So the answer is holdover. It says commission position statement CP13 states that a single party listing needs to be in the same name of the specific buyer and should have the holdover clause removed. And so this is what it looks like. I represent the buyer in a single party listing. I represent the buyer, and I go find a FSBO and we put the contract together. There is no holdover because I'm representing the buyer, so I'm not going to get to keep the listing if this deal falls apart. That's where I want your heads to go. Think of representing a FSBO or a buyer on a FSBO deal, for sale by owner, on a single party listing. You cannot have a holdover. There is no holdover on a single party listing. I actually think this is a very real question. A listing broker using the exclusive right to sell listing contract or the exclusive right to buy listing contract would be obligated as part of the brokerage services and uniform duties to do all the following except close the property if the listing expires, but there is an active contract to buy and sell, advise the seller or buyer to obtain expert advice, count in a timely manner for all the money and property received, verify the accuracy or completeness of the seller or of the buyer statements. Again, guys, like, we're not verifying their accuracy. We're not filling it out for them. We're not going through and making sure that they did all their work. We're not making sure that they did it all correctly. So brokers are not obligated to verify the accuracy or completeness of statements unless they think that they are untrue. The other items are outlined and required in both representation agreements in the broker's uniform duties section, right? Like everything A through C, it's in our contract. So if we're agents, like those are the things that we're doing. We just talked about that on the second or third screen. An unlicensed assistant may do all of the following to support the efforts of a licensed broker except what? Hold an open house, prepare a competitive market analysis, also known as a CMA, and present it to the seller, provide access to a property for buyers, measure a property to provide square footage for a property brochure. The answer is prepare a competitive market analysis and present it to the sellers, right, guys? That is something that is for a real estate agent to do. So your unlicensed assistant, they can host an open house, right? They need permission from the seller, but they can do it. They can provide access to the property for buyers, right? So they're representing your buyers. They're going to have to get permission from the seller again. Measure a property to provide square footage for a property brochure. Like, guys, we can do this. We're just not obligated to do it. Same with an unlicensed assistant. So prepare a competitive market analysis and present it to your seller, because then we're talking price and tactics. So unlicensed assistants may prepare a CMA, is not the answer. Unlicensed assistants under the supervision of a broker may hold an open house, they may measure property, and they can provide access to properties for buyers. They just need permission to do a lot of these things from the seller. Under the designated brokerage, the brokerage relationship is between a designated broker and the principal, unless the broker changes status to a TB. The designated broker and the party or parties the broker was designated to represent. Only an agent and the principal. The designated broker and the employing broker if they receive confidential information. Again, guys, the designated broker and the party or parties the broker was designated to represent, like, that is it. It does not extend to anybody else, right? And it says under Colorado law, the brokerage relationship is between the designated broker and the party who the broker represents and no one else. The employing broker is allowed to assist the designated broker without having any relationship that is implied by law. Again, because your managing broker can actually represent the other party. They are not a part of your contract. You and you alone as the designated broker are the only one that is in that relationship. A broker has been approached by a neighbor to list the neighbor's home. The property is currently listed with another company, and the neighbor said that she only has 2 weeks left on her listing contract. The broker should what? Tell her to wait, and the broker will contact her once the current listing has expired. List the property, but make sure the new listing contract does not start until the expiration of the current listing. Explain that the broker cannot speak to her while she's under a listing contract with another broker to avoid violating Rule 615B. Determine if the current broker is in breach before proceeding. So the answer, guys, you can list a property, right? So if someone reaches out to you, it says per Rule 615B, a broker who is approached by a seller may take the listing at that time. However, the listing term cannot begin until the end of the seller's current listing. So this is not sign crossing. If someone calls you and says, I want to talk to you about selling my house, we can get a signed listing agreement to take place the day that their current listing agreement ends. We can't call them, right? That's sign crossing. And how many trust accounts may a brokerage firm have? A minimum of 3, no limit, no more than 4, at least 1. So the answer is no limit, guys. And this is the thing. The brokerage firm may have an unlimited number of accounts. The requirement is that all money be accurately accounted for. A brokerage firm may also have no trust accounts if it only does property sales. And they use the title company to hold earnest money. So if we're having the title company to hold earnest money, then we are not going to have any trust accounts. So everyone, that was the PSI Real Estate Exam prep. We did focus on Colorado today. Hopefully that was helpful for your real estate exams.